The Panthers core is locked up, but which contract will end up aging the best? All this and more on today's Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Tuesday, July 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube and on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. Shout out to every day to come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So, Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on another edition of the show to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers. Today, we are going to talk about the contracts for the Panthers of the core 10. We're going to discuss how their contracts will age, which ones will age the best, which ones have a possibility to age well. We're going to even talk about a wild card for which one will age, and eventually, in segment number 3, we are going to discuss the contracts will eventually be aged the best throughout these next 5 years, as the Panthers have 10 guys locked up. And for you, the Panther fan, and for Bill Zito, the front office, the fact is the job is done for what they are putting together as far as the logic of running it back in order to win another Stanley Cup, which the Panthers put themselves in a prime position based on how they've managed trades into surrounding their core, and also the fact that they've been able to keep the guys around. So that has been a major plus for the Panthers in order to give themselves the confidence that they are rightfully the favorite to repeat as Stanley Cup champions. But the thing about these last two runs for the Panthers here is the fact that every clinching game for the Cats have had one theme in common in each of it's been two different themes, but each of these two themes have been consistent throughout each of the individual runs. So in the 2024 Stanley Cup run, where they won the first one, the Panthers had one goal against in each clinching game throughout round 1 and the Stanley Cup final. In 2025, they had at least 5 goals or more in a scoring barrage. So it's been that same tale in the same postseason in 2025. So it was one theme of the one goals or less against in 2024, and then 5+ goals or more scoring in each of the rounds in 2025. So it's been, when you think about running it back and you think about the pure domination that the Panthers have put together, especially because 3 of them were on the road, gave the front office a lot of confidence. It's like, hey, this is a team that we need to try to keep together. The fact is that they are still at the peaks of their power. They haven't shown any signs of slowing down. Why not give ourselves an opportunity? And the players, they did the job as well. This was a collaborative effort between taking less money, instead of going elsewhere, instead of trying a new environment where you have to get acclimated, where some examples of people who were possibly trying to get their life settled, which in the example of Sam Bennett, he's tried to get his life settled together in South Florida, where he's already established. He just got married this weekend. During his wedding, he came out to the theme of the Panthers goal song, just celebrating the Stanley Cup win and the Conn Smythe Trophy. So the summer of Sam Bennett has just been incredible with the long playoff run that he had. So it really came down to a lot of personal sacrifices, knowing what was going to go on off the ice as well, as far as lifestyle. And the fact is that you have a great situation here in South Florida of a culture that is set on winning and doing whatever it will take to win. And for the longest time, the Panthers didn't have that. And now it's a destination where the guy who was seen as one man's trash, it's the Florida Panthers' treasure. And in the case of this offseason, it's Jeff Petrie, for the guy who has not won a cup, who's been on an extended playoff run at least once, with the Montreal Canadiens back in 2021. Unfortunately, they lost in 5 games to the Tampa Bay Lightning, but it's a little bit of that new blood. But the question I have with running it back and only bringing one new guy in is the fact that Matthew Tkachuk put a lot of emphasis on the new guys, giving the guys who have been there for a while that newfound energy because of wanting to play for the guys who have not won a Stanley Cup yet. And the fact is that 95% of this roster coming back into the 2025-26 season were all part of the team last season, and 100% of the group has been at least on to a Stanley Cup final. So that made the 100% that has been at least that far to the Stanley Cup final gives a little bit of perspective to the rest of the group, saying that when the dog days of the regular season come around, maybe in like December, January, when you're still around halfway through the season, but you're not just there at the playoffs, you're not at the time where you need to be peaking. That is going to be interesting to see how the Panthers really manage things. But that's another reason why you would want the Panthers to run it back with this group, because of how uh to for this team not to get too low whenever things do go wrong. Because I mean, every the last 2 seasons we've seen the Panthers go on a Western Canadian swing and get shut out in back-to-back nights. One of them was in Seattle and Vancouver in one year, and then the other one was Calgary and Vancouver. The consistent theme was Vancouver. They've also lost in Chicago. They've also struggled one of those years, I believe it was in 2023, in Arizona. So that's another thing, that sometimes you might see those off nights, but it's just about how you manage your day. Paul Maurice discusses the winning the day is extremely important to how you get ready for the marathon that is the regular season, and then the war of attrition that is coming toward in the postseason. So the fact is that it's a group that's intact. They know how to rest, recover, as they have tried so much with their analytics and sciences, and just how it's more than just playing hockey games and knowing all the X's and the O's, but it's all just about the aftercare, what kind of food they are served. Which back then, the Florida Panthers, when they were uh, with previous ownership, they've had to at least buy a lot of their food out on the road instead of the teams actually serving them. So it's about really starting in it touches every single part of the organization, of guys wanting to come back because of how they're treated by management and ownership, and how they fly and the hotels that they stay at as well. So that's another luxury of what the Panthers are doing in order to have guys be in a comfortable place. The fact that they are ready game in and game out from a recovery, not only physically but mentally, as far as that. So that's another thing on just how the Florida Panthers have built this up in order to try to once again win on different levels. They are winning on the ice, and they're also winning with how they are getting their sponsorships, which a lot of them have order suites in the arena as well. For example, the partnership with Alexander Barkov and Joe DiMaggio's Children's Hospital, they have a whole suite dedicated to the children there. So the more of those you have, and the more of those partnerships within the community, which the Panthers have also sent the rookies as far as the development camp. They've also sent them to Joe DiMaggio's Children's Hospital. So the that winning is going to create more for the Panthers, which then they'll still consistently be spending in the community, and they're also going to be spending up to the cap, which in these next few years it's going to be basically on depth players as opposed to the core. That creates, once again, more than just a winning situation, more than just winning Stanley Cups for this Florida Panthers team. It's just one that is going to try to make consistent playoff runs, and that's how you build a fan base. It's not just making a playoff appearance, winning it all, and then not making the playoffs for 4 or 5 years at a time. We've seen that with another team in this region, but the Florida Panthers are putting themselves in a position where fans can connect to these guys. And that the fact is, when 20, 30 years from now, whenever we're looking back at anniversary teams for the Florida Panthers on the 2024 championship. Even though some of the similar faces were in 2025, you're gonna the people who will be 30s or 40s themselves are going to remember themselves as kids looking up to these guys like, wow, I remember when Brad Marchand scored the game-winning goal in Game 3 of the Toronto series, uh, and those overtime winners in Game 2 against the Edmonton Oilers as well. So that's another very important part of why it's it's key to extend these guys and to make sure they're doing this while their window is still open in these next 5 years. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss some of the candidates that contracts could age well, and we will see who is the big wild card in the fact that their contract could age well. We'll discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And summer sports are in full swing, whether you're at a baseball game under the lights, golf on the green, or high stakes soccer action. FanDuel is the best way to make every moment and game more exciting. If you're already following the action, why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburnt at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups. Right now, the Marlins are on a hot streak, at least winning 7 of their last 10, have a chance to at least inch closer to the wild card berth right before the All-Star break next weekend. So I've been checking on FanDuel about some matchups based on those. So are you new to FanDuel? New customers can bet $5 and get 150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Segment number 2 here on this Tuesday, July 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Tuesday. So, just some housekeeping notes for you guys is the rest of the month we will be going 4 days a week in recordings, and then once August hits we are going to be going down to 3 recordings a week for you guys over the summer. There's still quite a few things to get to as far as what's going to be coming towards the summer. Is a possible extension for Mackie Samoskevich, a possible trade. We're going to be discussing top 10 best regular season games and postseason games of the year, where we have a lot to get to in the summer. And we're going to discuss mostly days with the cup of the newer guys, not really of the guys who have already hoisted the Stanley Cup a first time, because I'm not expecting anything different. If there is something different about their cup celebrations, we will discuss that here on the show. So, contracts that could possibly age well as far as the core 10 for the Florida Panthers here, and we will give I will give my 3 guys in segment number 3 on who I believe will actually be the 3 contracts who I think will age the best for the Panthers. So some of them who I believe that could age well as far as the entirety, not necessarily the entirety of the deal, but at least in this championship window for the Panthers. One of the names that I do believe that could possibly age well is Seth Jones. His contract goes all the way until 2030. He will be 35 years old when the contract does expire, and there are options, thankfully, for the Panthers here in the case of things dry up, or the fact is that there's an injury, because the fact is that this is the nature of the beast whenever you're thinking about hard defense style, and hopefully the Panthers are able to continue to fight off the opposition's forecheck if it need be, and helps with the fact that the bodies for that second pair for the Panthers in Mikkola and Jones, they are big guys who could fight along the crease. But the fact is that Seth Jones is going to be one of the minutes leaders for the Panthers in these next 5 years, as he's expected to be the top power play guy to quarterback it, and even take up some top pair spots in the case of an injury for Aaron Ekblad. So he will be seeing some minutes with Gustav Forsling as well. So he's going to be at least averaging maybe around like the 22, 23 minutes a night, maybe even more, depending on the night for Seth Jones. But I do believe that with his game and which he is not going to be asked a lot to do really at 5-on-5. But the fact is that he has those extra assignments on both penalty killing uh, and power play. There could be that possibility that it doesn't age well, but I'm betting on the upside throughout this that that contract is going to age well. And the fact is, it doesn't take him past that year of 2030. So if the Panthers do need to reset things once that year comes, they have that opportunity to pivot and get a little younger. Matthew Tkachuk is another contract that I look at of the deals that are at least in these next 5 years for the Panthers. This is another one that extends all the way until 2030. They got him in that sign and trade with the Calgary Flames, as far as Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar, Cole Schwitt, and the first round pick, which ended up being Colin Potter for the Calgary Flames. So that's another thing for Matthew Tkachuk. As far as Chucky and getting to the Florida Panthers. It's crazy because once again, he along with the rest of the team really had to really adjust their game from more of offensively focused to a more defensively focused type of game. And it's crazy because the Panthers, they were the highest scoring team in the 2022 season. And even Matthew Tkachuk that same year, even though he wasn't with the Florida Panthers, he was with the Calgary Flames that had the top scoring line in the entire NHL with Johnny Gaudreau, Elias Lindholm, and then Matthew Tkachuk himself even had 104 points that year, and even for him 109, excuse me, and then he had 104 points the year after with the Florida Panthers, getting 40 goals, and then being a big part of the Panthers' first run to the Stanley Cup final, 3-game winning goals in the Carolina series, and even had the best chance when he had that broken sternum in the 2023 final. It's funny because the Matthew Tkachuk also had to deal with a little bit of maturing on the ice, because let's not forget that even in the 2023 final, he had those 2 10-minute misconducts in the same game for losing his cool. And those were also lessons learned about how the Panthers need to be the team to not be the ones to lose their cool and have their oppositions to be the one. If you can win at least that part of at least the trash talking and also the rest of the extracurriculars, you're on the winning side as far as that. And Matthew Tkachuk has been once again, I do believe that with his ability to uh, be that guy to battle along the end boards, be the guy to set up the in the case of Sam Reinhart on the bumper position in the power play, and also be that guy who would battle along the half wall and the corners. Because if a lot of the times, which what the Florida Panthers do is you'll see the defenseman on the right side trying to dump the puck in and rim it around, and then you have Matthew Tkachuk there. And sometimes Matthew Tkachuk has the option to gather the puck there or lift his stick in order for the puck to rim around more and allow the other forward or the F3 to get there. And if they are not there on time, you'll have the other defenseman on the other side pinch in, and also the defenseman that originally dumped it in, he'll go back into the middle of the point in order to stop a transition opportunity, which you'll see a lot of the times. Gustav Forsling is the guy who will slide in order to prevent those cross ice passes in the case of a 2-on-1, which you see why the Florida Panthers stop those counterattacks so well, based on what they use with their system on the forecheck, which you'll see. Yes, they'll give away up those odd man opportunities, but with the support that's coming from the defenseman from the one half wall to the middle, that helps those 2-on-1 situations, which why I think Gustav Forsling, which I'll mention more in segment number 3, which why I believe that his game will age well. A little bit of a spoiler there when discussing Matthew Tkachuk. Anton Lundell, he'll be 28. This one is probably some low hanging fruit for you guys when it comes to that. But his flexibility to just go up and down the lineup, play on the top penalty kill with he's mostly played with Etu Luostarinen, but now he's had a new partner for a while on that penalty kill in Brad Marchand. Which the fact that you're able to still split Lundell and Luostarinen give we didn't even mention the fact that Etzilus Turin is going to have his regular partner in Tomasz Nosek back for another season when it comes to him, when it comes to his penalty kill partner, at least for the most part, assuming that it isn't Nosek going to the box. Uh, the fact that it is the Panthers in that area of the game, they know they don't have to go through a training camp of working with someone else. But Anton Lundell, he has that flexibility to go up to the top line in the case that Barkov or Bennett get hurt, because most times it's not even Paul Maurice shifting Sam Bennett to the top line. It's Anton Lundell going back on that because he knows that he's played with Sam Reinhart before, and who knows in the case of Carter Verhaeghe that he's on that top line when Anton Lundell goes up. Usually when Anton Lundell goes up to the top line in the case that Barkov gets hurt, Etzilus Turin comes with him. If you guys have noticed that in the regular season, that we've seen that plenty of times. And the fact is that Bill Zito 1 through 3 can go to bed at night and doesn't have to worry about solving that position up the middle until 5 years from now. He's sleeping quite well. This one is the biggest wild card as far as who this contract possibly aging well, and it's Brad Marchand. Yeah, signed to 6 years from now. He's gonna be 43 when that ages, but you are signing this contract for what you could get at the beginning of the deal. And man, could that beginning of the deal at the number that Brad Marchand is taking home, well, before taxes. The fact is that he could play to that intensity. And the fact is that he might be needed to go up in the lineup based on the uncertainty of Matthew Tkachuk right now for the Panthers. And we could see him play with Alexander Barkov. We've seen him play with the perfection line of David Pastrnak and Patrice Bergeron in Boston just a few years ago. It wasn't that long ago when he was playing those top line minutes for the Bruins. So that uncertainty right now, and the fact is that you've had you have a third line that could be second line on most teams, and the fact is that you could interchange them to start. I mean, we barely saw the rat line of Kachuk, Bennett, and Marchand throughout this season. We've seen like a shift or two from time to time, but now in these next 5 years, you have the fans will have an opportunity to get what they want. So that is also the opportunity that fans are going to be able to get while knowing that there is also that flexibility that's coming with the guys that they are keeping around here. And yes, and it also has to do with the fact that there is a roster squeeze at this moment in time, that you are going to be starting off with below the max players that the Panthers are able to put together because of the fact that they decided to bring these up. And the fact is that they won't have enough cap room for a 22nd or a 23rd player, in assuming that everybody would start the season. So that's another thing of why that flexibility is going to be important for these Florida Panthers going into 25-26. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss the contracts that I believe will age the best. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment number 3 here on this Tuesday, July 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Tuesday. So, the contracts that I believe will end up aging the best for the Panthers. I already spoiled one of them in segment number 2, which was Gustav Forsling. So I will start there for the Panthers. Is once again the Bill Zito doing the job that he did in order to get these guys locked up, and the fact is we look at the contracts of a guy like Jacob Slavin in Carolina. The fact is that he's making just north of 6 for the next 8 years. I mean, that contract is going to be aging well. And in similar to Jacob Slavin, Gustav Forsling does not put up the points neither. And these are two defenders for respectively the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes are not going to be bringing home Norris trophies. And the thing is, they're probably neither of these guys are probably not going to be making the Hall of Fame. And before you guys freak out with what I'm saying out loud about Gustav Forsling and Hall of Fame chances is because of the fact that the defensive defenseman is not well represented when it comes to voting in the Hall of Fame. So that's why I say that when it comes to Gustav Forsling and his possible chances. I could be wrong, but history has shown that the defensive defenseman usually gets underrepresented, and they don't get enough votes in order to get to the Hall. But as far as what Gustav Forsling's ages and where his contract stands as far as where how well it will age for the Panthers. Is the fact is he could still log a lot of minutes, and the fact is that he's not on the top power play or barely on the second power play at times for the Florida Panthers. So it helps him conserve his energy for those top shutdown minutes, which we've seen over and over again in multiple playoff runs, shutting down the top players like Draisaitl, McDavid, which once again we need to really emphasize. The fact is the Panthers don't blow out the Edmonton Oilers with a bang in game 6 if it wasn't for how Gustav Forsling handled his minutes against the McDavids and the Draisaitl's of the world. It's and the fact is Nikita Kucherov, every time Gustav Forsling has been on the ice with Nikita Kucherov in the last 2 playoffs, Kucherov has gotten nothing around Gustav Forsling, which how well he's able to get back, battle along, reach around without committing a penalty as well. That's another thing of Gustav Forsling's game that he just continues to do night in and night out. And the fact is that you're not expecting him to score points is the fact that I believe that his contract will in fact age well for the Panthers. Sam Reinhart is another one. And you're going to see a consistent theme for me as far as why I believe these 3 contracts will end up aging well. Is the fact is Sam Reinhart scored 39 goals, and it feels like that he scored 25. At least in my opinion, it feels like he scored a lot less because of what we've seen before, and we saw that in 2 seasons ago with him scoring 57, and then the Stanley Cup clinching goal in Game 7 in 2024. But the fact is that we've seen a little bit of a drop off in Sam Reinhart's game with him scoring 39. And the fact is that he probably made a better Selke trophy case than Alexander Barkov, because the fact is that he scored more shorthanded goals. He's been on the ice more this season. But the name recognition for Alexander Barkov is probably the reason why Sam Reinhart didn't get more of those votes. And it's the voters give more respect to centers when it comes to their defensive prowess versus wingers. So just because he doesn't get the trophy recognition does not mean that his value as a defensive player is not. I mean, if you guys are watching or listening to the show, you and watch Florida Panthers hockey on a consistent basis, you definitely know that for Sam Reinhart of just his value is not always tied into the amount of points he scores, but he scores a lot of big goals, especially 4 goals in a clinching game 6 in 2025. And then number 1 for me, I'm going to say Alexander Barkov, which we've seen over and over again. Of just the fact is that yes, the Panthers have the defense core that is great around the crease. They block a lot of shots, but the fact is the fact that you have a captain in Alexander Barkov who will not cheat the game, who will actually play a little bit lower in the zone in order to to take away the middle of the ice. And also whenever there's a transition opportunity, he sets the example with how he gets back as far as back checking, so that allows the opposition to work more towards the perimeter, and it helps Sergei Borovsky see the pucks a lot better. So Alexander Barkov with his defensive game is one that I believe that will age well. And the fact is he is going to be 34 years old at the end of his deal, and probably that's not going to be the end of his career. If the Panthers do decide to extend them past that, which I don't see a reason why, and he wants to make it around 20 years with the Panthers, which at that point, which Barkov getting drafted at 18, that'll be 16 years with the organization, depending on where the franchise stands as far as what economically and what they are building as far as the next core, which it's going to be interesting to see how they wheel and deal some of those future picks for the Panthers. Are they going to decide to uh, continue to say throw all the picks at trades to build the team now, for rentals, or are we going to use those for like the next phase and develop some of them, and then go into that. So that's going to be dependent on that, because the Panthers farm system rankings, they're going to be consistently towards the bottom because of how much they will be trading away. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Panthers build around that, as the Panthers right now are at the peaks of their powers, and Alexander Barkov is one really at the center of it when it comes to just preventing the opposition's top players from getting things going, and against the best defensive line in the NHL, which is centered around the captain, Barkov. But that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. Thank you so much for listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. On tomorrow's edition of the show, we are going to discuss which contracts could possibly age the worst for the Panthers as far as the core around the team. We'll discuss that more on tomorrow's edition of the show. So come back then. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.